You're live. You hope you're live. Once again, well, I was going to make a video about this already anyway, and I wasn't sure where to start. So I kept putting it off, and then I saw that other video that kind of helped me reframe the beginning, I guess. And I'm still going to go with my original intro. Figure it out. So how did I get on this tangent? I guess, well, in the previous video, I was talking about anecdotes as opposed to bullet points. And so then here we're talking about anecdotes versus plot, I guess. You might have seen some work where it seems like it's kind of a strung together, like I had spoken about vignettes. Vignettes is slightly different because they're not automatically related, even though they're under the same umbrella. We'll come back to that in a minute. Like I said, how did I get on this tangent? Personally, some of what I want to write is memoir, and I know there's plenty of videos where they decry this as a legitimate, nobody wants to hear about your life, buddy. Like, well, okay, but not everything is historical, drama or science fiction or, excuse me, fantastical, over the top kind of thing. But then in the other video, they brought up the high stakes issue, and yes, my first film teacher had said that our scripts should be the most important story they could tell, but not every story needs to be life and death or life or death, right? I mean, we can pare that back quite a bit, especially, if we're writing more young fiction and things. We don't have to always worry about securing the nuclear codes or being on trial for our lives for the homicide we didn't commit, or something. When I say we, I mean our characters. But again, if you're writing something of a more personal nature and you don't want it to be just memoir, then the stakes have to be a bit higher, typically. But I mean, yeah, I guess, yeah, if you want to just write about your trip to Greece or something, then you should be writing for the Travel Channel maybe instead of a book. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not as quick to pass judgment as some of the other video creators on how you approach that and what might be successful and what might not, right? Like I didn't think this, I mentioned On the Road, and I think in the last video, and I didn't think the stakes were super high in On the Road, but there was, divorce and other personal life dramas that weren't necessarily full-on tragedies. But a lot of people also have panned that novel as being having its issues, right? Which we also discussed elsewhere previously. And On the Road being another one that's had a tough time being adapted. They've tried to make it into films, and they finally made one with Twilight Gal or whatever. So yeah, the happy family won't die if they don't adopt that puppy, but we can still be concerned how the thing is going, the story. We want it to work out for little Timmy's B-Day, right? That can still be enjoyable enough if Timmy's birthday wish comes true. I had a friend who he loved the no plot idea. And he was always talking about this way back when I was first trying to, kind of show him some things. And, suffice to say, he never wrote anything, including any real songs much, because, he was just a guitar noodler mostly. And yeah, so, stuff has structure to work, or nobody will read it or watch your film that much. Again, this is not... just because I say movies doesn't mean I only mean movies. I was going to leave that to the end, but I'm putting that now to reinforce that if you are a bookish person and writing literary things rather than film things, this should still apply to you. And so hopefully don't click off yet, although I think the difference there, as we discussed in the previous video, is that a lot of people don't start a screenplay the way a lot of people start a novel or a short story, where they just kind of want to explore and see what happens with the characters. I think with a screenplay, as was the point of the video that I watched, most screenwriters do start with structure, even if they don't fully understand the structure or aren't that good with the structure. They know that, like I said, they've had some intro class or they've bought some intro book. And so they know, oh, okay, well, it's supposed to be this many pages, because a book, again, can be twice that many pages or half that many. Well, not quite half that. If you have, around a screenplay number of pages for a book, you'd call it a novella. Okay. It wouldn't quite be a short story. But if you boil down a lot of screenplays, they won't be full-length novels. They will be short stories or novellas. That's what, that's where the rub kind of comes in, is kind of trying to figure out how many pages for how much thought really can vary when we start to change a screenplay into prose. And so if we literally just drop out a lot of the, stage direction and that kind of thing, and line spacings and that kind of thing, you really only end up with about 40 pages typically. Sorry, it's true. Whereas a lot of the stuff that goes into a book that makes it that much longer is stuff that, again, automatically gets chopped out for a screenplay, and everybody goes, the book was so much better. Well, it wasn't necessarily a better movie, but it had a lot more, thoughts and descriptions and things than just showing a guy in a sweater. You're not having to try and describe a Fair Isle sweater to an audience with a plaid hat. You can just see it. Done. He's wearing a sweater and a hat. Done. So yeah, that can vary, because again, your book can get bogged down if you put in too much of that detail. And a screenplay, like, forget it. Right? Just yeah. Yeah, like I said, nobody's going to read that or watch that. So I usually had some ending or goal in mind, even as a younger writer with not much experience or whatever in story craft. And I'm still not as there as I'd like to be on a lot of topics, but even if the execution of getting there was not always very well done, it wasn't just a collection of anecdotes. Sometimes filler scenes and junk, as I mentioned in the previous video. That's mostly just skill that comes with time. I mean, even now, I still struggle with that. Almost everybody does, right? The idea that not everything can become feature-length movie or book, that was kind of the focus of my original, for this video, was sometimes you do have a short story and you just can't seem to get it longer, especially, again, with the movie. With the movie, it comes so close and it's just not quite, it's even harder, because if you just have a short story, you can maybe expand it to a novella and you're fine with that. But a feature film, again, kind of has to be in these parameters of a specific length. So sometimes we end up like, I guess it was here. Maybe I guess I thought I filmed this and maybe I didn't, or maybe I mentioned it and I didn't. I don't know. Okay, whatever. Well, if you're watching this and you haven't watched that one, then you'll watch that one and maybe get some insight out of it. And it's okay. Blundering through my own lectures because I was thinking of something totally different before I turned on the camera. Sometimes a vignette, you get, 3 plays, each 30 minutes, like I said. They will never be the best or most popular movies, but things like this can exist. Also, the story within a story, like the David Hogan sequence in Stand By Me. Stand By Me is a pretty short movie already, actually. I think it's like 88 minutes or something. But then, halfway through, we get this little short story that is mostly just there for comic relief and a little character development for Gordy. Fine. But that story is meant to be a short, little lark, even though Teddy thinks the ending sucks and there should be more there. And he, that aligns with his version of, unrealized comic book hero work or whatever. That which we don't know is if it was really a story Stephen King up, why can't I talk right now? If it was really a story Stephen King came up with by the campfire in his youth, or, if he just crafted it to sound like, and resemble such a thing, that he would have been, much more gifted to concoct with years and memory and, or whatever as a writer. But, it doesn't really matter when we see the movie. Doesn't, matter to our enjoyment where the original bit came from in the first place. Not all fiction or film is meant to be enjoyable per se, of course. So let's say effective then, right? How to know when a thing needs more length and all that still remains kind of subjective, though. Sorry, I guess. I don't know necessarily what people actually want in entertainment. Like, I'm not a mind reader. I mean, I know what Hollywood thinks or insists, they want, which is mostly just mindless sex or something. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but these aren't typically monetized, so I guess I'll worry about that later if they bleep it or however YouTube changes the German word to English. I know during the press junket, the actors will go on and on and on about how deep the story is or their characters are, but mostly all I see is just two attractive actors having mindless sex or failing to make a relationship work, right? Does this really reflect most of the actual people we meet? Of course not, or I hope not. But there is already, steamy spectacle visuals that also already appear in most romance novels. So I guess if your regular novel doesn't have these elements, you're already at a loss, fighting an uphill battle. As I did talk about this a little bit in the previous video about, film is more visual, and a lot of books, I don't know, they're intentionally being not visual, I guess, but again, transferring one to the other, if you're going to make a screenplay into a book, it can be more interior, intellectually interior, but you're probably not going to throw away all your good visual content if that was, the reason you wrote the film in the first place. So yeah, it's like I said, it's worse for a movie, which is supposed to be visual for starters, if you don't have visual content. This more relates to the previous video topic now than this particular one, but they connect somewhat, right? There was a kind of combining these two trains of thought then. In the early 2000s, there was a ton of those Everybody's Connected movies with the overlapping plots and subplots, and most of them, I think, were rom-coms. Usually there was too many characters and they got bogged down. So, because all of the storylines couldn't be such high stakes. The plot, or for me, why do I care about some of these tangents? Or, the first big one that was done previously was Shortcuts by Altman. And that one was effective, but it was long. So they made shorter movies. And the most two serious drama ones that I remember were Traffic and Crash, right? Traffic, I haven't seen it in years, but the big twist is when the politician's own daughter becomes addicted. And then there was three main storylines, I think, but there was no real resolution so much at the end that I can recall for all the threads. Whereas Crash, I mean, obviously, well, if you haven't seen Crash, you might want to watch that one slightly more than Traffic if you're interested in this kind of storytelling. That one had the scene that should have, for my opinion, been the finale. They kind of ruined it, the movie, putting that sooner. Matt Dillon is the bad cop, and then he has this big redemption with this beautifully shot, and the music and then of course the end of the movie is more the spoiler, the young cop who turns out bad instead of the Matt Dillon storyline as the ending. So, you know, it kind of changed the tone of the part of the movie. It kind of changed maybe the point of part of the movie. I don't know. Like instead of being this movie about this bad cop who turns into a hero, he just kind of got buried in the mix, I guess, in that regard. Yeah, it's a made up scene, but you know, many of the police are heroic, and the firefighters, you know, too. Might as well, you know, throw that in there because I'm going to talk about that in a second. Many of them actually lose their lives, whether they save the other person or not. So of course, yes, we have, you know, dysfunction and tragedy at Uvalde now too. So, you know, without dwelling on any specific instance, there's another example of high stakes that isn't just adopting a puppy, right? But again, mostly this is why we love our first responders, or typically want to make movies about them, I guess, right? Glorifying them whilst also showing their humanity or whatever. I suppose the police drama has been more common on television, and the rogue, like dirty, hairy cop became more the movie trope. Yeah, these are meant to be kind of generalizations, not, you know, hard, fast rules. Fireman movies may be less prevalent than firefighters on television too. Backdraft being the main one that comes to mind, but that one like turned more into a whodunit also, because it went off on the whole Robert De Niro tangent, subplot, whatever, which tied the beginning of the story to the end of the story and da-da-da, but it wasn't just, again, it wasn't just an anecdotal thing about firemen going from one call to another, like emergency from, you know, the 70s. You know, there was a through line, and so that's what I'm. But the stakes were still high because you had this arsonist who had been committing homicides and blah blah blah. So again, the average day of an average firefighter doesn't include homicidal arsonists, even if he wasn't trying to kill anybody and blah 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 blah. Or in that case, he was trying to kill specific people. Anyway. Of course, then the other theme is the undercover police, where they have to kind of skirt the line between blending in with the criminals and, you know, not becoming criminals or whatever. That's been pretty rich soil for film and television. I'm not going, you know, too deep into any one tangent here, just pointing these things out. War movies, the stakes are mostly automatically high. You know, they land on the beach and they have to survive. Some sci-fi, kind of the same thing, landing on the alien planet or whatever. But again, well, okay, the other side of that would be astronauts, though, like Apollo 13 or whatever, where their life is in danger, but not because there's aliens or anything, just because their own spacecraft might not work, right? Again, you can still make a movie about astronauts where nobody's life is specifically in danger, maybe, and maybe it will still be compelling and, you know, be an actual story, yada yada yada. But again, most of these things aren't going to be rom-coms. If you had a rom-com where the character was an astronaut, that might throw an interesting dimension into the mix that wasn't in all those other ones where the guy has some safe job at a pet store or something. Anyway, so like I said, I was just, you know, so like I said, this is kind of more of an anecdotal video in a way than a bullet point video, but hopefully giving you some meat to think about where your stakes in your movie should be. Because again, if you have some teacher who's telling you, no, the stakes need to be higher, they might not be lying, but it doesn't mean that the stakes need to be that somebody's gonna die. We're not all writing James Bond. We're not all writing, like I said, the courtroom drama. Those, you know, I don't really get into genres very much on purpose here. But it's still information you can apply to the genres as they go. Again, horror movie being, I didn't mention horror movie, but also Westerns. Usually the Western ends with a big showdown, right? There's no usual big showdown in the same sense in most typical drama. There's usually more of an emotional showdown. That's the point I'm trying to make, you know. And who wins the emotional showdown, that's what guides whether or not that character is the hero or the villain and all that kind of thing. And so again, knowing that ending, okay, we're going to have this emotional showdown. the mom and the son, or like an ordinary people or whatever. You know, who's going to come out on top? Because we always thought this was the character maybe that should come on top, and now at the end it's flipped. Why is it flipped? Oh, it turns out mom doesn't know everything. You know, mom's a bit OCD. You know, that movie always gets referenced, and I never even thought it was that great of a film, but it's a good case in point because it pops up so often in these kind of things. So yeah, that's about it for now. A little bit longer than I expected, but not terrible, right? And again, hopefully, if you thought this was useful, you can go back and watch my 2 or 3 previous videos and go from there. And this, as always, you can leave any questions in the comments if there was something I forgot to mention or something you thought I didn't quite explain well enough. Or a lot of times I'll type more later in the description if I thought of something afterward. And doesn't seem like it's enough for another video. So if you look in immediately and don't see much in the description, come back in a day or two and there might be plenty more. So have a great day and happy Tuesday and all that.